This crew cab GMC's been sitting for almost 30 years, and I'm gonna try to get it back on the road. Howdy folks. So this is my 1985 GMC 1-ton 4-wheel drive crew cab square body. And this has basically been a dream truck of mine for, well, about as long as I've been into square bodies. And it's got the single rear wheel, 1-ton full floating axle, Dana 60 in the front, and it's about as close to my dream truck as I could want. But it's been sitting for almost 30 years and it needs some help to get it back on the road. So what I'm going to be doing today is doing a little bit of wiring, showing you guys around, and we're going to try to fire this thing up. So like I said, as far as I know, this truck's been sitting for almost 30 years and it needs a lot of help, you know, if this is going to get back on the road. So I'm going to kind of show you guys around, see some of the neat little features that this baby's got over its lifetime, and we're going to see what it's going to take to get this thing back on the road. So let's take a look inside. As you can see, typical square body, a little rough bench seat. Well, let's just say well used. Inside upholstery, it's really not too bad. That back seat especially, it's actually in pretty good shape. Someone had the forethought to put that plastic over it. Kind of saved that back seat. Can't say too much about the front seat though. Headliner, of course it's gone. Left all this glue that likes to just fall on your head, make you look like you got dandruff. And possibly the most unique part of this whole truck, we see right down here, that's these air control switches, because this bad boy's actually got airbags on all 4 corners. If we come back here on the back, yep, we got airbags, helper bags for this whole rear suspension. On the back side over there too. And actually, airbags on the front too, which I was not expecting looking around this whole thing. Very interesting, unique. I wonder, you know, what the purpose of that was necessarily, because you can totally understand airbags on the back, but airbags on the front makes me wonder if that was more for ride height, or leveling out the truck when you're under load. I'm not sure. So we're gonna have to run through some of these other features and see if we can figure that out. Now, the inside's all nice and good, but what really matters to a lot of people is what's under the hood. Like I said, this thing's been sitting for close to 30 years at this point, so might have our work cut out for us underneath. Now, sorry for the wind. It is a typical Kansas day. Now, if we take a look at this, that is the meat you want to see. Big block Chevy, 454. Not sure. I really don't know anything about this motor. I know it's big block, I know it's a Chevy, and I know it's got some aftermarket speed parts on it that might give us an indication on what's been done to this. We've got our Earson, however you want to say it, chrome valve covers. We've got our chrome timing chain cover and Edelbrock performance intake. Now that could mean that somebody's built up this engine, tried to give it a little bit more horsepower, but we may not know until we get this thing running, which we're gonna have to see if we can, because the biggest issue with this truck, I think, is the wiring so far. We take off this air cleaner. Now, some of you can already see those spark plug wires. They've been all chewed up. If any of you live out in the country, you know pack rats are an old truck's worst nightmare. And right there, I don't know if you can see it, those distributor wires have been chewed straight through. So my plan initially, when I was going to pick up this truck, was to try and get it running and drive it home. But it was late, I had to work the next day, and quickly found out this thing was not going to run easily. So that plan didn't fall through. Just ended up loading up on the trailer, hauling it back, and discovered some other issues that I'll point out next. But this thing was never going to run that night. So that's what we're going to be working on. We're going to be pulling that distributor. We're going to be replacing some wires. I got a new pigtail to run to that. That distributor, you can see how shiny that is. I think the last guy might have replaced on that. Tried to make it nice, but it sat again and the rats just got to it. So we're going to be replacing those wires. We're going to be checking the carburetor. Of course, old Quadrajet. It's all free up. It's not stuck. It's not seized. We're going to check this filter in the front. Look about running some fuel lines to some backup tank. We've got these that'll run to the pump. And we're going to try and see if we can get this thing running. So one of the other features you might have noticed with this truck that makes it very unique is this. It's not an AC compressor. This is an air compressor. Most likely maybe pulled off a, I don't know, maybe a C60 or some kind of grain truck or something. It's got bracketry set up here. Now this is actually for an onboard air system that this truck had. You saw the airbag system that it's got on all the wheels, and we've got air lines that run into the cab up into the switches inside. And now what I believe is, and I found near the rear axle a small reserve air compressor tank. So what I'm guessing is this guy had some sort of switch to flip on that air compressor and fill up that tank for the bags. So overall, this truck really is in pretty darn good shape. The grill, you can see, pretty good in one piece. A couple of cracks on some of the headlight trim. This fender is about perfect. Probably have to take off those little fender flares. A little bit of rust on our rockers down there, but nothing too bad. Of course, missing our driver's side mirror. You can see this driver's side is definitely the pretty side of the truck. A couple of dents, a couple of dings, that little bit of rocker rust. But our rockers on the inside, very, very solid. Nothing much on the outside around the door. Doors are very good too. A little bit of rust. That's not bad. Not bad for a square. Other issue, these back doors. That guy's stuck. It's locked. I can't seem to get it undone. Little dent there. Bed, little beat up. Not too bad. The inside of the bed, it's pretty decent. It's really not bad. Some surface rust there in the corners. Kind of typical. But overall, it's really quite good. Of course, the tailgate, it's got the 1-ton marker lights. Very nice. Glad it already has those. I'm gonna have to rewire the whole thing though. Those wires, they've been exposed to the elements for Lord knows how long. So those are definitely gonna need fixed on. And that, look at that bumper. My God. Looks like a loaded diaper on the back of this thing. It is absolutely disgusting. Definitely gonna have to take care of that. I don't know who thought that was a good idea, but they should be drug out behind the barn. So that, I don't know. Maybe I'll take that to work and take the old plasma cutter. Just do a line about right there. Take about the bottom 8 inches out of that. And make that a lot nicer. And I might have to do that because someone went and welded that to the frame. That's real nice. You can see that right there. Back of it. Just welded right to it. Lots of boogers. I don't know who welded that, but that's not very good. I guess while I'm under here, let's take a look at that. So those, let's get a better view. Those are my U-bolts. You know, the things that just hold the axle, you know, to the truck. Yeah, those have nearly rusted through. That is really bad. Kind of makes me glad I wasn't able to drive this truck home, because that would have made me worried. It probably would have been okay, but doesn't make me happy seeing that. I've got new U-bolts. We're gonna get replacing on those, and then we don't have to worry about it. Oh. Now, since we're in the back, we'll come around here on this side. Passenger side is definitely the ugly side. We've got a good bit of damage right back on this side. Of course, our fender around this rear wheel well, starting to get that bit of rust. Not the worst, not great. And I think our old man driving around the farm, I think his depth perception might have been starting to fail him, because it seems like all the worst damage is on this passenger side. This big old dent in this door. I'll see if I can't pound that out from the inside. And then this guy, big old streak. Definitely drug that on, I don't know, some implement or something out in the field, because that is deep. That's not just a scratch that's gonna come out. So unfortunately, that would mean if this was gonna be a perfect truck, that fender is junk. Gonna have to be replaced, which is a real shame, because it doesn't really have any rust. It was a really clean fender other than that. So a little bit unfortunate. I don't know, I'm gonna be keeping it for now, because I'm not buying a new fender for this thing. It's already red, matches the truck, it's original, and I don't know, it's kind of cool. It's a little battle scar, I guess. Now the other issue I mentioned is this rear wheel. I'm gonna have to pull off and take a look at it, because it is seized. It does not want to roll. when we got this thing here, we had it on the back of the gooseneck, and I was pushing my butt off trying to get it moving off the trailer. And finally, once we got over that back ramp, we had got it to where it would actually roll and we could break it in place, basically where it's sitting right now. But that rear wheel is stuck, and my guess is something with the brake system has seized up. So we're gonna have to pull that off, pull that wheel off, pull the axle out, because this is a 1-ton axle, and see if we can figure out what went wrong with those brakes. So I guess first things first, we obviously know we throw a battery in this thing, it is not gonna run. So we need to pull that distributor out. I'm gonna replace on those wires and stab that back in, and then we can throw a battery in this thing, see if it'll crank, see if our starter wires are still okay, and go from there. Next step after that will be fuel and seeing if this thing will run for any bit of time. Now, nice thing about these square bodies, they've got about as much room as you could want for climbing in here. So we'll take one of our funky little wrenches, and look at that. Just slides right in. That's the wrong size. Well, now come on. Well, that's just not working. I'm gonna use the long boy. I can know to where that's pointing. Yep, here we go. So I realized I did it backwards. I marked the number 1 spark plug wire as the number 1 cylinder, which doesn't matter because I left the spark plug wire on the engine. What I needed to do was mark the cap on which of these points was going to the number 1 cylinder. Because we took this off, we left those on, that doesn't matter. So this is actually the point on the distributor that was running to the number 1 cylinder. Generally, on a Chevrolet, what you like to do for consistency's sake and to keep this HEI point located the right direction, or to get this HEI point pointed in the right direction, is you want to make this your number 1 cylinder. And you stab this in your distributor and have this point pointing at your number 1 cylinder. And that just makes things line up nicely for assembly, reassembly. It's a lot nicer rule of thumb to follow. Now, I was right. This distributor is like brand spanking new. You can see how dang shiny this thing is. Barely any oil sitting on it. It feels brand new. Everything on the inside is basically brand new. But it obviously sat long enough outside that the rats were able to get to those wires and just chew them clean off. So that is what this is for. We're gonna get this new pigtail spliced onto these wires. We'll be able to get this reinstalled and we'll be one step closer to running. Now, something that's a little different with this distributor, just being a newer piece, new manufactured. Some of these, like your voltage regulator here on the inside, is just slightly different. You can see this old one I've had laying around. These connections here on this end are slightly different, but everything else, I mean, as far as splicing wires on, shouldn't be anything. It shouldn't really change anything. It's just this being a newer manufactured piece, slightly different than the old one I was using as a reference, but shouldn't really make a big difference for what I'm trying to do. So remember how I said I thought it wasn't going to be too different? Well, pulling apart that new distributor, you can see this whole section. Now this is the end that sticks out of our distributor to go up to the cap. And you can see this is like a whole, actually assembly. And that's where our wires go in. Now if you look at, of course, the old style, where that's a replacement pigtail made for the older style distributors. Well, that doesn't quite replace the way I thought it was going to. So I think what I'm gonna do on this, instead of trying to tear into this guy too much, I mean, all these wires are still good, I am just going to cut this new piece back here around where these old fittings would be, and I'm going to replace that and splice it right here on the outside of this guy that goes in that new distributor. And so then we're still going to replace where these wires all got chewed up, but I'm not going to have to fiddle with trying to get in here and replace these because it's unnecessary. It'll still be just fine replacing it here on the outside. So that is our new distributor wires. I got them all soldered, all put back together, lined up. I will say, if you are doing wiring on your old car, do not use electrical tape. I know that's what it's called, electrical tape. You think, oh, I'll use it for my electrical. Don't do it. You're gonna regret it. Electrical tape just gets all sticky and falls apart over time. It stretches, it heats up, the heat cycles of the engine especially. Electrical tape is a no-go. Don't use it. Get you some rolls of this. This, as you can see, is Tesa tape. It is a purpose-built wiring harness tape. It's made to hold up to the heat. It's a fabric tape. It doesn't leave that sticky residue. It sticks to itself real well though. And it will make your wiring harnesses, if you're doing something custom or trying to protect existing wires you have, it will make it look a lot better, and it's not going to be a sticky mess in 6 months like electrical tape is. So, let's go ahead and take a seat. Pull this rag out of there. Get our distributor stabbed back in. Now it was pointed, I think, now I think that was about where it was. Kind of. Yeah, see there? It's not seating all the way down. There we go. That's gotta be it. Vacuum Advance plugged back in. Okay, so where I've stabbed this in, I think is about where it was when I took it out. I'm gonna leave this tie down bolt loose for right now so that we can adjust it when we get it running, so that we can adjust our timing based on what it needs. I don't know how close it is. We can maybe throw a timing light on it later. We'll just have to see. Now, something that I had to do a lot of looking to find is this column shifter bushing right here. I don't know why, but in my searching it took me forever to find the right one, but I think I did. That should slip. Oh, if I can get it. Might need a little screwdriver to push that in. Alright, let's see if this can't push that in there without losing it or breaking it. Oh, come on. And I hope that's the right thing. I think it is. Look at that. There we go. I think that is in. Now, So if you're looking for one of these, Dorman 02373. I don't know why, but that took me forever to find. So hopefully now you know what it is. So I think for today, our goal is going to be trying to get this thing running. I don't think it's going to take too much. We need a couple little things I'll have to run to the parts store for. Might pick up some spark plug wires. Maybe I'll have to see if I've got some laying in a box somewhere. Carburetor is going to be a big if, whether or not that thing's going to work at all. Fuel pump, whether or not that thing works. I should have one sitting on the shelf if this one doesn't. There's no fuel tanks in this truck. I've got 2 brand new ones sitting in a box, but right now there's nothing in there, so we'll need a small gas tank to run our fuel lines to. Other than that, we're going to see if this thing can fire up. So where I'm at right now, I've got this nice repainted battery tray I've got to install. It's just the one that came out of it. Luckily, not completely rusted through, surprisingly. So I put a fresh coat of paint on this. I'm going to throw it back in. Got fuel lines already run to the fuel pump. So we're going to set up some sort of external tank, see if this fuel pump is even working. Get us a battery installed, and I've also got a section of heater hose that's sprung a leak, so we're going to replace on that. Stop that leak, top off the radiator, and see if a little bit of power in this thing doesn't get it to turn over, maybe even run. So whenever you buy a new vehicle, it's a good idea to consider what you find on the inside, because I found this along with some other parts right after I bought it. And if you know what this is, you know it's a little bit of a pain in the butt. This is our heater core for the heating system on the inside, and that's going to go right down there. And with a little bit of inspection, you can see, sure enough, there's a bit of moisture down there. And if I pull back the sound deadening, I can feel the moisture that's left under here. So before I get to changing heater hose lines and doing anything more, I'm gonna replace this heater core. It's a bit of a pain in the butt. It's gonna take more time, but it should be done. Otherwise, it's just gonna leak even more right when I get this thing running. So, I'm gonna change on this first. So, now that I've been delayed about an entire day changing that heater core out, we're about ready to throw a battery in this thing. But first, I'm gonna go dig through some boxes I've got and see if I can't find a better set of spark plug wires. So no luck with spark plug wires. We're just gonna try to run these. If we do run into any problems, any real thin spots, see any arcing or anything, then I'll have to go try to find some. But for right now, we're gonna try to make these work. So next step, honestly, we're gonna hook up this battery, see what happens. It's something we want to keep in mind, especially with this, the wiring problems that I've seen so far. I've seen, obviously the pack rats have gotten to this thing. I've seen chewed wires to headlights, turn signal lights. Of course, the wires to the distributor were all chewed up. So something you got to keep in mind when you're putting power to something like this. You got the potential risk of fire or arcing or sparking or shorts that can come from where these wires have been chewed up. So we're going to plug in our battery, take a second to look over everything, listen, watch. We'll probably go inside the cab, look under the dash too, because the last thing I want is this truck burning down. So probably wouldn't be a bad idea to grab a fire extinguisher too. But for right now, we're just gonna hook up this battery and be ready to disconnect it in case anything doesn't go well. Nice black cables. Luckily, they've marked it with a little bit of a red piece of tape. Now I'm just going to kind of touch this negative end off the battery. We're going to kind of watch what we're looking at. Of course, we don't want anything going off that we don't want to. And I don't hear anything yet. Nothing seems out of the ordinary at all, so. That guy's on there. I'm gonna go take a look under the dash, make sure all that still looks good, and we'll come back. Well, nothing is on fire yet. The distributor looks okay. Power wire is a little chewed up. But if you can see that, that's that big pink wire right there. It's got something attached to it right there. Nothing out of the ordinary yet. A lot of wires under this dash. I don't smell anything. Nothing's smoking. Let me grab the key. We'll go ahead and put the key in the ignition, turn that, and see if anything happens at all. Well, I guess let's see what this key does. Oh, our fuel gauge is moving. Maxing out. Volts. Our volts are reading, so that might work. Nothing else moved. Wonder if we've got any lights. Oh, turn signal lights on. Oh, that is about as dull as it could be. That one's on. Marker light. Wonder if we've got tail lights. Can't tell if that's on or if that's just the reflection. That one's definitely on. Not super bright, but it's on. So we seem to have a little bit. Our cab lights are working. And it's too bright to tell. Well, I've checked the oil. It's got oil in it. Should we see if it cranks? It cranks. I think next step, we're gonna throw some fuel in it. I guess I could check spark before, but why don't we just go ahead and throw some fuel in it, see if the thing doesn't fire off. So I got a little cup of gas. Let's try filling these float bowls up if we can, without spilling everywhere. A little bit more at the back. All right, so that'll catch on fire. See if this thing doesn't fire up. Maybe run for a couple seconds. Not sure. If it does, we'll run these fuel lines to that little gas tank, little gas can, and see if that doesn't run. All right. Let's see what this does. Starter didn't like that. Well, that doesn't quite sound right. I'm gonna just pour some gas down in there. Get more in the float bowl. I don't know if that's really gonna do anything, but it doesn't seem to like cranking very much. This motor might be a little dry from sitting. Probably should have primed the oil system when I had the distributor out, but whatever. Right again. That didn't sound good. We had it for a couple seconds. Might grab the battery jump box, get us hooked up to that just while we're cranking on it. Now I did notice this. My negative connection on this battery is a little... Ooh. Actually, now that I'm feeling it, that wire's hot. It's a little toasty. As you can see, that cable it's pretty loose in there. I think I will disconnect this, try to snug that up, get that tighter on there, and we'll see if it doesn't crank better afterwards. Well, got this guy hooked up. Also got our terminal tightened down a little bit. Now, this is just a battery tendered. It's not really, I got it set on 15 amps. We're gonna see if that gives us a little extra boost we need. We're gonna see if we can't crank this thing up a little bit easier. Now, I went ahead and ran those fuel lines down to a little gas can, just in case this thing does start picking up fuel, if we can get it to run long enough. Now, I also don't know if the distributor is really in time, so that may be part of why it was struggling to run. Just throw a ton of gas in there. Definitely too much, but we're gonna try it again. And I tell you what, it's just having a hard time cranking. I don't know if that starter is feeling a little worn out. Could be a little bit of the timing being off. I left that distributor bolt loose so that I could adjust that, because I have no idea where the timing is at on this thing. So I think I'll let the battery charge for just a little bit longer. Maybe give it a little bit more timing and see if it doesn't want to run just a little bit longer. So I advanced the timing a little bit. Throw a little bit more gas in there. I don't know if those are filling up yet, but oh, I think that's full. Let's try cranking on a little bit more. Okay, I'm not really getting anywhere right now, so I think I will let it sit, let this starter cool down a little bit, maybe let this battery charge up, and we'll try again. If anything, if it comes down to it, I might have to check the timing, because I just put the distributor back where it was when I pulled it, and I have no idea if the guy before me put it in the right way. So that could be part of why we're getting that backfiring and that hard cranking when you hear it hit a hard stop. That could have something to do with it. So yeah, if it comes down to it, I'm gonna have to check the timing. Alright, I gave it a minute. I poured a little bit more fuel down into the carburetor. I think what I'm going to try to do, I'm going to try to crank on it just a little bit more. And if this starter keeps acting the way it does, I've got a couple starters sitting on the shelf. I may throw a new one of those in there. I didn't want to, but if this one keeps acting up like this, I mean, it's a brand new battery. I don't see it being a battery problem. The connections seem to be okay. Our ground looks okay. It's straight to the block. So, if nothing else works, and if this doesn't start to smooth up over time, I know it's been sitting a long time, so it might just be a little stiff. I know this engine is probably a little stiff and dry. If that doesn't help, I will probably go ahead and throw a new starter in it, see if that doesn't get it cranking faster. But for now, let's try it, see if it works. Well, I don't know if this is going to be as simple as just a timing thing or not. Starter seems awfully tired. I might give it a little bit more time, but I might go start digging through boxes and finding a starter that I can pull out and use. Alright, so of course I wasn't filming, but I just retarded the timing a little bit and actually got this thing to run for quite a few seconds, and not sure, but it might have even pulled fuel. So I'm gonna go crank on it again, see if it fires up. Actually ran pretty good. coming out of that vent over there on that valve cover. I think we're pulling fuel. Definitely hear some squeakiness up here. Woo! Well, now that is exciting. I don't know how long it's been. It could be upwards of 20 years since this thing's run. That is exciting. And it actually sounds pretty darn good. But I turned it off because the oil pressure gauge is not working in there. The other gauges, it's got no fuel tanks. That doesn't matter. Altimeter seems to be working. Altimeter. Is that altitude? The voltmeter is the voltmeter is reading good. I think that's working. I think the fuel gauge would work if we actually had tanks in it. The only thing is the oil pressure gauge is definitely not working. It's maxed out. So before I run this thing too much, I wasn't getting, it didn't sound like a ton of lift or tick. I did see a little bit of smoke coming out of that breather over there. So before I run this thing too much, I want to get something to read our oil pressure, because I don't want to be running this thing for a long time with no oil pressure. I think the other big thing is this starter. It definitely sounds tired. It is struggling. It's kind of been struggling this whole time. So I think I'll definitely see about changing this starter. It's working for the time being, but probably will be something that needs changed before this thing is really going to be, you know, good roadworthy. Well, this is exciting. I wasn't sure what it was going to take to get this thing running. I was hoping it wasn't going to be too much, but after fixing our distributor, getting a new battery, checking those connections, and not a whole lot else, we were actually able to get this thing running. So I think what's going to have to happen next time, that rear drum is still stuck. So if this thing's got any chance of moving, I'm going to have to try to tackle that, along with the rear U-bolts on the axle. Those are almost completely rusted through, totally unsafe. I got to take care of those. There's a couple squeaks and rattles up here in the engine bay that I got to take care of. Then maybe some sort of semi-permanent temporary fuel system, something more than a gas can laying on the ground. And I think I'll need something to read oil pressure. Like I said, I don't know. It sounds okay right now, but the last thing I want is to start taking this thing around the block, and next thing I know, the motor seizes up. So something to read oil pressure, and we might have a driving truck. So that's been this episode. Might just call this the red truck. I had a couple of trucks in the past. The gray truck, I just called it the gray truck. The brown truck, I called it the brown truck. So naturally, this will be the red truck. Either that or the crew cab. I don't know, but I've got a few more things planned for it. Definitely big plans in the future. Well, I'm gonna get some parts together, and we're gonna make this thing roadworthy again. So thanks. We'll see you next time.